Welcome to the Middleware Tech YouTube channel. In this series, you'll learn about Spring POJO Life Cycle. All code examples used in the videos will be available on GitHub. Let's get started.
Some example to understand this concept. We talked about how is servlet lifecycle work. So if you have walked last discussion, as we talked about, that servlet have three lifecycle methods. One is called init, another is called service, another is called destroy. Init is for initialization, initializing the servlet instance. Destroy is to destroy the servlet instance. That is called by the container. Destroy the servlet instance that is created for each request lifecycle. And service is used to call the actual functionality inside the container. That is the servlet lifecycle I'm talking about. Now, in our Spring framework, we're talking about the Spring framework. When talking about the Spring framework life cycle, I told you, if you remember, that we have, as we talked, we use one of the any of the use case that you want to implement in the Spring framework. We have controller class, we have service class, we have DAO class, right? And that is going to interact with the database. So as per Spring implementation, all these classes will implement using POJO. If I want to implement controller, as per Spring implementation, it is a POJO. Plain old Java object, nothing but a bin class. From the framework implementation, we use the term called POJO. The service class also is implemented as a POJO. Fine. And the DAO class, that also will implement as a plain old Java object. Right? Okay. Now, now we're talking about the life cycle of a controller class, life cycle of a service class, life cycle of a DAO class. That means automatically these life cycle methods, init will come. Init is for initialization, and destroy is for destroy to destroy the instance. And as you know, these lifecycle methods always called by the container. Think about the servlet implementation. The lifecycle method, you are not going calling as a developer. This lifecycle method is called by the container. These lifecycle methods are called by the container. Similarly, if we have down here, we have init as well as destroy. This lifecycle method is called by the container. Right? Now, we're talking about this lifecycle methods of any one of the POJO class in our Spring framework. In between, they are doing some actual task. Actual business logic is used by some class. Actual logic is actually executed by some class. Actual logic for DAO layer, some logic like insert, update, delete, select, that is being done by separate method. So all this POJO class use some functionality, all this POJO class will use some functionality before and after execution of the service method. So assume this controller class has some service method, this service class has some service method, DAO class has some service method. So all the POJO right here, all the POJO class use some function. All the POJO class use some function before and after execution of the service method. All the POJO class use some functionality. Means when it's going to execute some functionality before one lifecycle method gets executed, and after that one lifecycle method gets executed. Right? Right? So you can write like this: all the POJO class use some function before and after execution of service method. Service method means the actual method that is going to do the actual functionality. Right? So the thing is that for the Spring framework, also, if I'm going to use the Spring framework, in the Spring framework, IOC container is going to use this lifecycle method. So there is 3 different approach how IOC container will manage the life cycle of the POJO using so there is 3 different approach. So you can write 3 approach to execute Spring lifecycle wins. 3 different approach to execute Spring lifecycle wins. 3 different approach to execute Spring lifecycle wins. Spring POJO lifecycle wins. Right? So what are the 3 different approaches? Let me talk about the first approach, that is called programmatic approach. Let me talk about the first approach, that is called programmatic approach. Programmatic approach. Let me talk about the first approach, that is the programmatic approach. Right, so let me talk about the first approach, that is the programmatic approach. So as you know that if I want to implement, let me understand this 3 lifecycle approach, using a particular application. Okay, application like assume client send a particular request. Client send a particular request. So client send a request to whom? The IOC container. The IOC container. So client is going to send a request. Client is going to send a request to the IOC container. So what client send a request? The request is that the request is that client want to store some value into the database. So what we have to do is that client want to store some value in the database. So what this IOC container will do, it is going to parse Spring.xml, and I have some POJO class here. Assume class take any name of a particular class called demo, and this class is going to initialize. Now, what type of application we are talking about? We're talking about a client want to store some value inside the database. This type of application. Client is sending some details, and what client wants? Client wants to store some value into the database. Fine. So if client want to store some value into the database, I need database connection. So where this connection parameters will be defined? What I will do is that all the connection parameter will be defined here, like driver, then connection string, then user ID, password, username, and then password. These are some of the parameters. This parameter will define inside the configuration file spring.xml. So what IOC controller will do? IOC controller will initialize these values and provide the database connection to the user, so that user can insert some value into the database. So these are the parameters that I'm going to initialize inside the configuration file, and we have to create these values inside this class: driver, connection string, username, password. Right? So this is a one type of application, and in this application, what we are going to do is that what IOC controller is going to do. IOC controller is going to providing these details to the user. That means providing these details, IOC controller is providing a connection object to the user, so that user can do some database interaction with the database. Right? So this type of application we are going to implement. This type of application we want to implement, right? So how I can do that? So we can see how we can implement this type of application. So for that, what we have to do? We have to create a project. Then we have to add all the jars. Same like the steps, we have to create a Spring configuration file. We have to create a POJO class. Right? Fine. Let's see. All the steps. Our third step, second step, we have done. Add all the jar. Okay. Third step is that we have to create a configuration file. Create spring.xml. So when you create spring.xml, so select this, right click new, package, just name it as resources, and inside the resources create spring.xml file. Spring.xml. I'll come into that. Now, what are the class we have to do? Next, you have to create the POJO class. Step number 4. Create POJO class. So, what type of class it is? The class is going to give database connection details. So, create a POJO class. Select SRC. Right click, new class. And my class name is the package called PP. My class name is connection demo. Class name. So inside the class, what are the different instance variables should be there? 4 instance variables should be there that I have already written. This 4 instance variable, Control C. Control V, 4 instance variable should be there, right? So we can make it private string driver private string driver, private string URL, private string URL. Then you can use private string username, private string username, and next you can use private string password. Private string private string password. Fine. Yes. Now here we have total 4 instance variable inside the class: driver, URL, username, and password. We have total 4 instance variable inside the class. Now here now what we are going to do is that these details I'm going to provide inside the Spring.xml, so that IOC container will inject to the dependency injection and provide the connection, right? So we have these 4 instance variable, and what I want is that I want to get the connection. I want to get the connection, right? So these details should be provided as for example. Let me just write this. This details should be provided inside this configuration file. Right, this details will be provided in the configuration file. IOC container will provide or inject these values inside the POJO. IOC container will inject these values inside the POJO. Right, IOC container will inject these values inside the POJO. So when IOC container is going to inject these values inside the POJO, so we have to provide these values, right? So how to just provide the first you to provide the grammar. Grammar is defined inside the bins XML and DTD. Control C, Control V, and save it. So here we have to provide, as you know, that this is a bins. So inside the bins, I'm going to write the I'm going to create an object of a particular class. What is my class? You can see the class name is condemo. So create an object of the class bin id equal to let's see some object name con class equal to bin dot test bin dot class name condemo. So what you're going to do, I'm going to create an object of a particular class. The name of the class is condemo. Right? Now, when I'm creating the object of the class, I want IOC container to initialize this instance variable inside the class. IOC container to implement dependency injection for this instance variable, driver, URL, username, and password. So what type of injection I want IOC container to do? IOC container should do setter injection for them. So for implementing setter injection, which property I have to use? The property name is I want IOC container to implement setter injection. For this, we have to use property element. We are using the property element. First property is driver, and use the corresponding value. Assume I am going to connect with the Oracle database, so use the corresponding value as you know the driver name for Oracle database, Oracle dot jdbc dot driver dot Oracle driver. Correct. Similarly, control C, control V, property name you can provide here as an URL, and the corresponding URL value you can provide here as jdbc colon Oracle colon in colon @ localhost colon 1521 colon exe. So this is the URL to connect with Oracle database. So I have just given this parameter here. Similarly, you can provide another one element in the property. Name of the element is username, and the corresponding value for username is value equal to system, and the corresponding password. Another property, name of this is password, value equal to Oracle. This is how I'm going to connect with the Oracle database. Now see these parameters. Now see what we are doing here. This parameter is provided by whom? IOC container is going to inject this parameter inside the POJO class. Right. So these are instance variable in the class. So in that case, you can right click source getters and setters. For them, you can write because you are using a injection for them. Right. Right click source format. Right. So this is how we have implemented the class. So what we have done? We have created this POJO class. We have implemented setter injection. So IOC container will inject these attribute values inside the POJO class using setter injection. Correct? Fine. Now what we want? We want to implement lifecycle methods. We want to see how lifecycle methods is used to provide connection object to the client, and once connection is completed, then it's going to close the connection object, right? So we want to use lifecycle method in this example. So as I told you that Spring container can use lifecycle method with 3 different approaches. First approach you are talking about, that is programmatic. So in programmatic approach, how Spring IOC container will implement lifecycle method. That is our topic. In programmatic approach, how Spring IOC container, how Spring IOC container is going to implement lifecycle method. That is our focus, right? Okay. So if you remember that in case of programmatic approach, our build class should implement to interface. In programmatic approach, our bean class should implement two interface. One of the interface name is initializing bean, another interface name is disposable bean. What I'm talking about, we're talking about programmatic approach, right? So step 5. So bean class should implement, in case of programmatic approach, two interface. That is initializing bin and disposable bin. Initializing bin and disposable bin. Disposable bin. Fine. So there is step number 5. Fine. So new class and your class should implement, this class should implement initializing bin and disposable bin. Initializing bin and disposable bin. This interface. We have to check that where is these interfaces are defined. Let me check. Just click here. You can see disposable bin is defined inside what is the framework bins factory, and initializing bin is defined inside what is the framework bins factory. Actually, these two interfaces will give you the lifecycle methods. Where it is, if you just now talk about what the lifecycle methods are this: init and destroy. So in case of programmatic approach, we have to override the lifecycle method from this two interface. Let me override. Right click, source, override. So in initialization bin, we have after properties set. This is like an init method only. And disposable bin, we have destroy method. So these are the lifecycle methods. Click OK. So you can see I'm just overridden lifecycle method from this two interface to my class with my own code. Correct? So what we have to do, so what is lifecycle method? Who will call this lifecycle method? Container will call. So what I want to do, we want to do database interaction or insert. Client want to insert some value inside database. This type of functionality you want to implement. So which is my service method then? So assume this is an init method, control X, and this is a destroy method. So in between our service methods should get executed. Assume client want to do some insert operation with database. Okay, we can write public void insert db. Some function. Okay, we are not going to implement insert. Assume client want to do insert, so method is going to do. Before insert is also just and we write here system out and then just right in between that welcome to or write something that database insertion. Database insertion. Right? Okay. Okay, now if you see here, so this is the actual method or functionality client want to do. Fine. So before that, client need a database connection. Once database connection is got, then only it can do database insert. Right. So this database connection, I want client to get inside this init method. So in the init method, you can write class dot name driver. So as you know, the driver will be injected by the IOC container. So we load the driver. Then we have to get a connection object. Okay, so we can write here connection on equal to null. Just save it. Now, when I do the connection con equal to none, so I should get the connection object. So I want init method that is after property set method to provide the connection object. Right? So you can write here con equal to driver manager dot get connection, and inside this you have to pass URL, username, and password. Right? So this init method will be executed, then it will print something like system.out println like connection created. So connection created. Okay. Now, how the connection, when the connection gets created, who is for injecting these values? IOC controller is injecting this value inside the POJO. Then only this connection created. So when connection created, assume I have not written the code here. Using that connection, you have done some database ingestion. Assume. So when you have implemented your database insertion, in database insert, right? INSERT. So when database insertion is done, after that, I'm going to use destroy method. Who is calling destroy method? Client is calling insert DB method, but destroy method should be called by the IOC container. And it should destroy the connection object. So here you can just write on dot close. So if this method called, then you can just print a message that connection destroyed. Destroyed. That's it. Right. So what we have done in our example now? In our examples, we have implemented 3 different functionalities. One service method, that is insert. So before service method will be called, I want container to call init method. So in this case, the init method is lifecycle method is after property set, and I want container to call destroy method. In this case, the destroy method is destroy. This is lifecycle method, and this is the actual service. This lifecycle method should be called by the IOC container. And when you call the IOC container, it will provide a connection object, init method. Insert method will use the connection object to do database interaction. And destroy method will close that connection object. Correct. So in case of programmatic approach, this init method and destroy method provided by these 2 entities. Correct. So what client will do then? So I going to create a client. Right click new class. Client will call the insert method. Client is not responsible for lifecycle method. Lifecycle method is called by the container. Client will call the insert method, right? So just create client.java, client.java, and here I'm going to write application context AC equal to new class path XML application context class path XML application context, and here you have to provide the resources slash Spring.xml. So what I'm going to do, I am going to use application context container. Here, this context is going to load the configuration file is Spring.xml. So we have to import all the packages as it's given here. Fine. Right, so loading is done as well as object creation is also done. As you know that by default it supports the scope or single run scope. So in case of single run scope, it is already created the object when we have loaded the configuration file. After that, you're going to, when you got the object, how you got the object? AC.getBin. Using this, you'll get the object. Where is the object? You can see the name of the class object is con. So this is the object. C or con, something like that. So when you got this object needed by assumed by the client or your class con demo cc where to get them. So what it is going to return? It is going to return an object of cc. Now when client got that object, class object, now client is going to call the method insert. Client need to insert some value variable. So cc dot insert. Though I'm not inserting anything, what is our purpose here? Our purpose is not to insert value in the database. Our purpose here to check whether how this lifecycle method gets executed. So when client is calling this insert DB method, then before calling, you need after property set should be executed, and after calling close method gets executed. Right? Okay. Now in this example, since we are going to check whether how this lifecycle method is executed or executing. Remember, if I want to interact with lifecycle method, then you have to use one of the class, one type of class under application context. So you have to go to API documentation, Spring API documentation. Okay, if you go to the Spring API documentation, you will find application context. So there is another class under application context. Its name is configurable application context. Configurable application context. So you should use configurable application context if you are interacting with lifecycle method. It's recommended because you want to see how the lifecycle method gets executed. It's recommended that you use configurable application context. Then you can see all the lifecycle method properly. Let me check if it's working or not. So let me execute. Right click, run as Java application. And I'm executing this code. It is written the class name bin.condemo. So condemo class is defined inside pp package. Condemo class is defined inside the pp package. So that is mentioned here, pp.condemo. Correct. Let me execute once again. Right click, run as Java application. So it is not getting the driver. You have to provide the driver. How to provide the driver? Right click properties. The driver is already available in our because I have already installed Oracle 11xc database in the local system. So from there itself, I'm just providing the driver so that corresponding connection object you can create and inject inside the POJO and save it. Let me check it is working or not. Right click Java application. Just give me 1 minute. Talking about here is that okay, fine, I got it like this. So here, if you just see here, our client is calling insert DB. So before calling insert DB, connection created. So just write something here. It's very easy to understand. Database insertion. Let's see here. So database insertion, this client is doing database insertion. I'm not implemented anything. So this is the actual service method. Before that, our lifecycle method executed. See here, connection created. Lifecycle method gets executed. So, but destroy you cannot see, right? So execute once again. You can see here. Right click on a Java application and starting. See here. I should see the destroy method should also call because here destroy method throws exception, and here when writing con.close, this destroy method should call. Okay, so right click on Java application. Okay, let me terminate. So we can see here the this connection created. That means this method gets executed. That is, this method gets executed. This after property set method gets executed. That's so we can see connection created. After that, this method gets executed because client is calling here insert DB. Okay. Now, if you want to see that, I want to see that destroy methods executed also, then you have to do small extra task you have to do here. The extra task is that you have to just close this application context object. That is AC dot close. You have to call it manually. All this close. Then you can see all the three. See here. Right click, manage Java application. Yes, just see here. This is the lifecycle method gets executed. This is the actual service method that client want to execute. Insert or delete select or the operation it is. Once it is done, then this destroy method gets executed. So this method and this method executed by our IOC container. And these are part of lifecycle method. Who is calling them? IOC container is calling them. But we have to provide the implementation. We have to provide the implementation. How we have provided the implementation based on that IOC container to call these lifecycle methods. Right. So database insertion is not our purpose in this lab. Our purpose is that I want to see programmatic approach how lifecycle method is executed. Right? We want to see the programmatic approach, how lifecycle methods gets executed. Now here, Now here, in this programmatic approach, it's working fine. It's working fine, right? Programmatic approach, how the life cycle methods executed. Similarly, we have another two approach that is called declarative approach. So let's try the second approach, or declarative approach. Let's try the second approach, that is declarative approach. Declarative. So in case of declarative approach, also we have to do the same things. Same things we have to do. Control C. These are the steps the same, right? You cannot that you have to create a project. You have to add these jars. You have to create a Spring.xml file. You have to create a POJO class. These steps are same. These steps will change. So in case of declarative approach, what we have to do is that there is no concept of interface in case of declarative approach. What we have to do is that we have to create our own method. In case of declarative approach, we have to create our own method. For init method, I have to create like my init. I have to create user-defined method. Or for destroy method, you can create an user-defined method called my destroy, right? And this true method should be called declaratively in your configuration file. So let's see how it works. Let's see how it works. This is only. Let's see how it works. So for declarative approach, what I want to do is that I want to write. This is Spring IOC lifecycle demo. This is a programmatic approach. Okay. So just trying to rename it. Right click, refactor, rename. Lifecycle demo, and this is programmatic. This is the lifecycle programmatic. Fine. Next, I want to get another one code declarative. Right. What I have to do, just copy this project, copy it, and paste it here only. Right click, paste. Paste, just write here declarative. Same project I am doing without creating unnecessary time waste. I want to create the same project like this, and I want to modify the code in this project. Declarative. Now when you go to this declarative approach, same code as I told you that this is the code. And declarative approach, my class should not implement any interface. Class should not implement any interface. That's the first point. Second point is that I should not use any interface provided method. Last time we have used after properties set and destroy. The interface provided method, right? So without using interface provided method, I should use user defined method. Like I want to use it as my init. User defined method, my init. Right. Okay. I could say. Okay, let me check, save this. And I want to use another one method called destroy. Destroying an exception, control Z, fine. I'll check this, and I want to use user defined method, that is my destroy. So if you see in declarative approach, I am using user defined method, my init and my destroy. There is no concept of interface that we are talking about. First point. I'm using user-defined method for init and destroy in case of declarative approach. Fine. I'm saying 1 point 2 times 3 times because it will be helpful since we are doing it first time. Right. Now when I'm doing this declarative approach, here these two methods, when I call, how I can call these two methods. I have to call these two methods declaratively. How to call these two methods? I have to call these two methods from here. Save it from the Spring.xml file. We go to Spring.xml file. Here you'll find the bin element. Under the bin element, you'll find some attribute here called init method or something like that. It should come by default. Init is not coming. Check. Init method. Init method equal to what the method name? See, method name is myInit. Method name is myInit. The method name is just right here. myInit. Okay. The init method. Similarly, I have to call destroy method. Destroy method. What is the name of the destroy method? Is a defined destroy method. That is my destroy. My destroy. This is a defined method, my destroy. Correct. So I'm calling this true method declaratively from the Spring.xml. Fine. Now here in your class, where you have written these two methods, it's giving some exception. To resolve this exception, why the exception comes, adding public void myInit throws exception should be there, and public void insert db throws exception, and public void my destroy throws exception. Fine. Now, if these classes everyone is throwing exception, so it should not give any error, right? Let me see this coming. Set return type to void. It is void only. Okay, so you can do one thing. Just change this name as my. It's not given idea, right? Do the dash. Similarly, it is my destroy. Don't use any dash. My init. Don't use any dash. It will not give any error. Yeah. Okay. So this configuration file is calling my init. This configuration file is calling my destroy. Correct. So this is a declarative approach that we are going to implement here. So this is another one thing that we have to implement inside Spring.xml. We have to call this user-defined method inside step number 6. Step number 6 in Spring.xml file. We have to use this my init. We have to call this my init and my destroy. And these two things we have to provide inside which class? Provide inside the container class. Java. Fine. So these are the tasks you have to implement. Now let me check and declarative approach how these lifecycle methods actually executing. Let's see how this lifecycle is executing in declarative approach. So let's come to here and go to client. Let me just close all. And here I have used configure application context. So you can new configure application new class path XML application context. I'm getting an object and call the client and call an insert method. And I'm closing this. Let me click. So I click on as our application. Okay, just see here, please. It's working in declarative approach. So in declarative approach, when I'm calling the actual service method, so before calling the actual service method, it's calling the lifecycle method. Now in this case, in declarative approach, And once my task is done, I'm closing the container, which is called the destroy method. So lifecycle methods gets executed by the Spring IOC container before and after your business method execution. Correct? This is a declarative approach. And it is working fine. Now let me tell you that none of the approach is used in production. In production, I try to always prefer to use annotation approach. Remember, though I'm starting with this, in none of the approach is used in production environment. Always we try to use the annotation approach in production. Because in case of annotation approach, you have to write very less number of code. As you know, that annotation come into picture just to the replacement of your replacement file itself. Right? So next you're talking about the third approach, that is annotation approach. Annotation. So using annotation approach, how I can implement lifecycle methods, fine. So this 4 is common for annotation approach also. Don't do any changes. So to implement annotation approach, what we have to do is that in case of annotation approach, we have to use some predefined annotation. Okay. Sometimes we say that this is called post construct and pre-destroy. We use these two annotation. In case of annotation approach, we're talking about fine. Inside a class on demo.java, you have to use these two annotation. For instance, your method, one is called post construct. So this annotation we used for your init method. We have to use an annotation that is called pre-destroy. Pre-destroy. Right. So these are two annotations. So pre-destroy we will implement for the destroy method. So these two annotations we use to call a lifecycle method. Okay. So how to use them? How to use them? Let's see how to use them. Now this time, what we will do is that same code I'm going to replace the name. Just copy this, right click, copy, and paste it with annotation. Paste it, annotation. Right here. So as just now I told you that annotation approach. As I told you that in case of annotation approach, we don't need any declarative implementation. No declarative. Remove this one. No declarative approach. So in case of annotation approach, we have to use same user-defined method inside the class as your init method, my init. Assume my init and my destroy we are going to use. So this is the my init method and this is the my destroy method. So assume these two methods are your lifecycle method, right? Now, in case of annotation approach, how I have to call this lifecycle method? That is our topic. Correct? So in case of annotation approach, if I want to call this lifecycle method, in case of annotation approach, if I have to call this lifecycle method, I have to use this annotation @post construct for init method. Just you have to import that. and at the pre-destroy, you have to call for the my destroy method. Control C, Control V, Control V. That's it. So these two annotation I have to use to call the life cycle method. Fine. So it will work. Now this is my client. You to remember that if you are using annotation, to implement a life cycle method, you have to provide one class instance to the IOC container. Again, I'm saying, in case of annotation implementation, not only here, wherever you're going to use annotation implementation, you have to provide a class instance to the IOC container. So in this example, we are using lifecycle method. We are using lifecycle method at the annotation that is called at the pre-destroy and at the post construct. For this, we have to provide an instance of common annotation being post processor class to the container. How it is? How we can provide instance of common annotation being post processor class to the container. Just I don't know the path, right? So what you do is that right here, or you can go to our Spring documentation also. Common annotation bin processor. This class object we have to provide. Common annotation bin post processor. This common annotation bin post processor, this class is defined inside this package. Control C, and you can open that frame view also. No problem. This API documentation also you can open. So I have to go to Spring.xml, and here go to the object of bin class equal to just provide this object. Save it. Right, this class object just straightforward. Then it will work. And from where you'll get this, you can check this API documentation, always open. This is API documentation. Okay, just keep it open because any one of the package you may interact with in our discussion. Keep open this Spring API documentation. Control Z, enter. Right? Okay. So talking about this class object, you provide, because in case of annotation implementation, you have to provide the class instance. Since we are talking about lifecycle annotations, so we have to provide common annotation interface first. Sorry, this is a different class. This is another class. Our class name is common annotation being post processor. This class object. Control V. Fine. That's it. I think it should work. Let me check. So the third step, what I have done, sixth step for this, step number 6 inside spring.xml file. What I have done is to store an object of this class. That's it. Now I think it should work. Let me check. Go to the client.java and let me execute this. Let me just clear, right click, run as Java application. Okay, just see it is working. So this is our lifecycle method, connection created. This is lifecycle method, connection destroyed. This is the actual service that I want to implement. And this lifecycle method is executed, in this case, using annotation implementation, that is at the post construct and destroy. Fine. So these are the three different implementation that we talked about. How IOC container can manage lifecycle method, can manage the POJO instances using the lifecycle methods. How IOC container, how to manage the Spring POJO lifecycle instances, lifecycle method of POJO instances, right? So these are three different approaches: programmatic, declarative, and annotation. Fine. Okay. So next we'll talk about another one important attribute. I'll not go into that level. Next, let's see what is the next topic. Yes, add the required. So what does it, what are the use of this add the required annotation? This is another one important annotation, and it's used a lot. That's why I'm just separately talking about this. So if you see here, add the required annotation. Talking about here. Right. Okay. Okay. Now see the example just now we have done. Just now we have done the example, life cycle method example. Just now we have done this life cycle. See here. Life cycle method example. This is programmatic approach. Annotation approach. Now in this, what we have done, we have some instance variable. This instance variable is injected by the IOC container using this configuration file. Then when client want to do any task, client do that task and the lifecycle method execute task. It's fine. What is this IOC container is doing? IOC container is injecting this instance variable value inside the class. POJO. What type of injection IOC container is doing? IOC container is doing one type of setter injection. IOC container is doing one type of setter injection. So if I don't want to do setter injection, let's do one thing. Just disable all of this. Source tower command. Right? And here and just provide one default constructor. Right click source. Right click source. A constructor using fields. Default constructor, right? Deselect all default constructor. This is my default constructor, and for this class, I'll just write here default constructor. Control C. Just write here. Control V. Constructor called. You can write it like this, constructor called. Right? Okay. Now see. So inside the class, I have default constructor as well as getters and setters for the instance. Now, if you execute this code, right click run as Java application, It's giving some error because I don't want to show this part. What I want to say is that by default, IOC container support constructor injection, not the setter injection. By default, now in this example I have used setter injection, right? It's okay. So by default, command by default IOC container support constructor injection because if you don't provide getters and setters inside the class, what will you do? You are not going to provide default getters and setters in the class. If you want to create an object, it's going to call a default constructor. So by default, IOC container support IOC container will support the constructor. Fine. Now, if I want to implement setter injection, then I have to provide this element, property element, right? Then you will find that container has implemented setter injection. You'll find that container has implemented setter injection and it is working fine. So constructor called because when it is going to create an object, it is called the constructor. But in this example, you are using setter injection. Correct, is a property element. So it is using IC container is using setter injection in this example. Correct. So setter injection for which attribute? 4 attributes: driver, URL, username, and password. Setter injection it has done for this 4 attributes: driver, URL, username, and password. So for this 4 attribute, it is doing setter injection. Correct. Now we are talking. Now see, in this example, in your class, you have total 4 instance variables. Now somehow assume you are not using one of the instance variable here. Assume I am not using this one. Source toggle command. I am not using this instance variable property element for this instance variable. I am not providing to the string.xml file. And if you execute the code, you'll find right-click run as Java application. It's giving an error because IOC container not got the password because you are not providing the password. You have disabled this line, right? That's why IOC container cannot inject a password inside the POJO class. That means dependency injection or setter injection is not implemented for password field because you have disabled this line. Right? So we are talking about @required annotation. With the help of @required annotation, we will make setter injection mandatory. To make setter injection mandatory for a particular attribute, we will go for @required annotation. What I'm saying, we use this @required annotation to make setter injection mandatory. Somehow, if you missed a particular attribute, it will give. You have to provide a particular attribute to make a setter injection mandatory. We use this @required annotation. How it is? Let's see here. In this example, when you have not given this password, it is giving an error, right? Yes. So what I can do here is that you can go to client demo class. Inside the class, what I'm doing, I'm just making driver @required @required annotation. That means I have to provide a driver name inside the string.xml. Fine. Then I'm going to provide control C URL. That means I have to provide URL details in the string.xml. I'm using username. That means I have to provide username element, property element in the string.xml. Then I'm using a password required. That means I have to use password element inside string.xml. So I have used required annotations for 4 types of instance variable. I'm not using in the instance level, variable level, I'm using in the setter level. You can use it for setter level, it is recommended. Now here, right now if you are not providing any one, now I have used required annotations for all the instance variables, 4 instance variables. But if you don't provide the property element in the spring.xml file, just see what is the error. Right click, run as Java application. What is saying this? It is saying that null password denied, being creation exception. Okay. This required annotation is not working because to implement required annotations, you have to provide one of the class instance. One of the class object you have to provide inside. Since you are going to provide annotation, right? Already I told you that you're going to use annotations inside a class. On the class instance, you should provide to your IOC container. So for required annotations, we have one class called required annotation bin post processor. Okay. For annotation, we have one class called required annotation bin post processor. So from where you will get that class? org Spring framework bins. Go to org Spring framework bins annotation. Okay, then you'll find here one class is there called bins factory annotation. Here you'll find one other class called required annotation bin post processor. This class object you have to provide to the IOC container. So when you provide this class object to the IOC container, here bin class equal to control V. For this class object to the IOC container, then it should work. Let me check. Right click, run as application. See what it is saying. It is saying that bin creation exception, bin initialization exception, password is a see here. Property password is a required attribute for the bin. Is given exception called property password is a required attribute for the bin. That's why you cannot compile and run the code. Why? Because you have used password as a required attribute, but you have not provided the password in Spring.xml. You have disabled it, right? So assume source toggle command. Now I have. Now if you are going to execute it, I think it should work fine without any error. It is working fine without any error. Now why it is working? Because I'm just talking about required annotation, that using required annotations, you want to make setter injection mandatory. I have used required annotation for this 4 instance variable. So if you are using required annotation, then you must have to provide property element for that attribute inside the string as well. Right? So that we're talking about here. It is used to make a statement injection mandatory. That means if we use @required, if you use @required annotation, if you use @required annotation for instance variable, required annotation for instance variable, then we must have to provide property element for that instance variable. We must have to provide property element for the instance variable. That's it. That's it, right? Yes. That only we have done. That is the purpose. Same like if you have done in Java, very simple things. You generally add that override annotation. Override a method from base class to derived class. So somehow, if you have not done some parameter correct, and you have used override annotation, then it will give some error that when you are going to override a method from base class to derived class, it is not proper syntax that you have used in the derived class, the base class overriding method. Same like that, in your POJO class, you can use the required annotation for instance variable. If you are using this annotation for instance variable, then you must have to provide the property element for that variable in the Spring configuration file. So another one thing we find is that in case of the required annotation, you have to provide this class object to the IOC container. You provide this class object to the IOC container, and the required annotation being post processor. You have to provide that. Remember this, right? So this required annotation, generally always we use it for the instance variable inside the class only. Okay, it's always used for an instance variable inside the class, right? Inside the class. So generally we don't use outside the class this required annotations. We always try to use this annotations inside the class only. Right? So this is the scenario one thing that we're talking about. Next